Good morning. We are in our Hillhurst United Church fake kitchen. This is the Heritage Room, about 112 years old. And I'm really thrilled to have Julie Van Rosendaal, who many of you will know from CBC Radio, who comes and helps us feel comfortable around food and helps us be curious and playful as we enjoy creating and making. So welcome to Hillhurst United Church.
Thanks for having me.
We are glad you're here, and we have such a tough recipe today. When I saw all the ingredients laid out here, I freaked out. We have, I think, 3. Is that 3?
It's a pretty simple recipe. We've got flour, salt, baking powder, a little bit of leavening, some water, and some oil and butter, some fat.
Where's the sugar?
The basic, well, in the flour.
Oh, okay.
In the flour.
It's never enough.
We could make this sweet. If you wanted to make a sweet dough, you could add some sugar.
Don't tell my wife.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're really thrilled about is she's going to help us make some bread. Bread's daily bread. In all the religious traditions, bread's important. And we thought we would just say, Julie, you come and work with a dummy. So here I am. This is making bread with dummies. Hello.
Isn't it Baking for Idiots? What's that series?
Baking for Idiots. I can be a dummy or an idiot.
No.
Okay.
There's no, I mean, bread is like you said, it's a staple of cuisines around the world. And I thought we would do flatbread, which is a really fast way to get bread on the table for cultures around the world. There are variations on flatbread everywhere you go, and they cook quickly. I thought we would do it on the barbecue, which a lot of people don't think of, making bread on the barbecue. That. And so I made a batch of, this is just basic naan bread. I mean, it goes by so many different names. This has a bit of yeast in it, so I made it ahead of time, so it's a little bit sort of softer and poofier. But you're going to mix together one that's leavened with baking powder, because yeast is hard to come by right now. If you don't have any in your cupboard, you can use a little bit of baking powder. You don't have to use leavening at all. You could just do flour, salt, a little bit of fat, a little bit of water. Okay. Do you want to mix yours up while I roll my dough out?
What do you mean mix it up?
I mean,
we're starting
use the fork or the spoon and stir it up in your bowl. So what I have in your bowl is a cup of flour. This is sort of a basic flatbread, no yeast recipe. A cup of flour, a quarter teaspoon of baking powder, and a little bit of salt. I've got about half a teaspoon of salt in there. And that little dish in front of you, yeah. So if you add that, stir it together so that it's all, well dispersed in the flour.
Okay.
And then you can add the butter, or you could use lard, you could use shortening, you could use drippings from your roasted chicken, any kind of fat. If you keep fat in a jar in the fridge, do you do this at home? Do you have a fat jar in the fridge? You don't have to.
I don't think I have a fat jar in the fridge.
Look in your fridge, see if there's a fat jar.
I have some fat right here. It's a little bit different.
You just take a little bit from your upper thigh. So you can work that in, and a little bit of oil too. I mean, you could use one or the other.
This is oil?
That's oil.
And I pour this in?
Oil.
All of it?
Pour it in. I would use about half. It looks like 2 tablespoons in there.
Okay.
And the great thing about bread is the best bakers go by feel. And when you look at old cookbooks, which I love, they often say, add flour to make a soft dough, which is how it works. Getting a feel for what the texture should be is how you really learn how to make great bread. Okay, so once you've blended that in, you can use your fingers or a fork.
What about the water?
Then you add the water. Okay, so you pour the water in.
I do that
Looks great, yeah. And as you knead it, it's going to work in those bits of butter. So pour in your flour. There's a bigger spoon, a spoonula. If you like to use that, yeah.
This thing? That's better to use?
We can use fork, it doesn't matter.
All right.
Keep using your fork, and then you want to stir it until the dough comes together and you have a nice soft dough. And then
you're going to
knead
like
it,
that?
And that's going to develop the gluten. So you'll get that nice sort of stretchy chewiness to the dough.
Okay.
Awesome. It looks good. I want to come over there and just put my hands in it.
There you go.
Sometimes your dough might look a little bit dry, but when you get in there with your hands, you'll see that there's enough moisture in there.
How come this doesn't look like that?
Because it's not completely mixed and it hasn't had a chance to rest. So with that, you want to turn it
on.
Hold
on, it needs a chance to rest?
Well, it does. It needs a chance to rest.
I love that.
And the gluten will have a chance to relax. And if there's yeast in there, the yeast will do its thing. It'll start to rise. And so when you're making like a yeast dough, this one is a little bit different. It's got some yogurt. It's got an egg. I'll share the recipes with you.
Yes, great.
And a little bit of yeast, but very similar. A lot of people want their dough to be not sticky at all, and they keep adding flour. But as it rests, it'll sort of, the flour will absorb the moisture in the dough and it'll kind of swell and it'll get less sticky.
Can I touch this now?
You can touch it. Yep.
Okay.
It looks good. So if you turn it out onto your board, you've got a little board there. You can knead it, and if you need some flour,
it's like making a
I believe there's
snowball.
flour behind you too. It is like making a snowball.
Yeah.
Just don't throw it at anyone.
All right.
So I'm going to roll mine out really thin, and the way I do that is just by putting it on the countertop, and you want it to be a little bit tacky. So if you flour your countertop, it's going to kind of slide around and be hard to roll out. But if you leave it unfloured, you can get it really, really thin. And so this you cook in a hot skillet on the stovetop. If you have cast iron, you can get it really, really hot with a little bit of oil if you like, or just a dry skillet. Or you can throw it right on a preheated barbecue and it will not stick. Even sometimes I don't believe that it won't stick, but it doesn't stick. If your barbecue is really hot, I'm going to take it outside and show you.
Okay, so the thing about Calgary, it's raining and it's May. It's not snowing that I know of. We are going to barbecue that today.
Yeah, we're going to toss it directly on the grill. This works with pizza dough too. So, if you want to...
You could use this as pizza dough?
You could use it as pizza dough. So what I do on the barbecue is just grill it on one side, flip it, put the toppings on, turn the heat down low and close it, and that creates sort of an oven environment. And it'll melt the cheese and whatever toppings you have. But if you do it really, really thin, they'll kind of puff up and get nice and charred on the grill or in a hot skillet and be fantastic.
So what things do you put on this if you were going to add things on top?
Well, you could brush it with a little bit of garlicky oil or butter.
Oh, nice.
Or, if you're serving it with dips and spreads, things like hummus or muhammara, I love doing. Just nothing. I would just toss it on the grill and you let the smoky sort of charred bits add some flavor.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, you got
So
that fancy?
are you kneading it? Okay, so here, let me show you how to knead. I'm not even paying attention.
Good idea.
Here. Okay. So you take your dough. This doesn't need to be kneaded, but if you kind of push away with the palm of your hand, turn it, push away, turn it, push away.
What do you mean turn?
Looks like you need
Left
a
turn
little
or right
bit.
turn?
Doesn't matter.
Oh.
Just move it. This is the most therapeutic part. And if you have a
Can you
stand
think of
mixer,
somebody you're frustrated with during COVID? And
you just
wanna,
get your
this is a
frustrations out on your dough.
Need.
It's a COVID need. So if you have a stand mixer, you can use a dough hook attachment and that will knead your dough. But I just love getting on the countertop and just working it, right? You can't over knead it. You want it to be sort of smooth and elastic. Looks like you need a little bit of flour. There's some flour behind you in that container. Just a little bit. The one that says cream, flour.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, and then
just a little bit.
A little bit on here.
So it should be sticky. So my great niece, who's 5, was making dough with me once, and she said, it's sticky, but it's not sticking to me, which I think is a perfect way of describing what bread dough should feel like. It should be tacky and sticky, but not covering your hands. So if your hands are too covered with dough, it might be a little bit too sticky.
This feels good. This is sticky, but not sticking to me. How's that?
Exactly. I think that's such a perfect description. So but it will be quite tacky, and as it rests, it'll swell and it'll get less sticky.
How do you know when it's done?
When it's smooth, like a thigh.
Smooth like a thigh. There you go.
It's when it's smooth, a little bit elastic. So if you pull it apart, sometimes you'll see it kind of break apart. But if it sort of comes apart more smooth, if it stretches more smoothly. I seem to have lost a lot of my words during this pandemic.
That's okay.
Can I say for the record that I thought this was an audio interview and I dressed in my pandemic outfit.
You're overdressed.
I'm dressed for radio. I thought I was talking to David Gray today.
You are overdressed for church. We do a thing on Sunday before communion. It's called Kneading the Bread, and we invite people to come forward. So we replace this out there, and people come forward to a station and they knead their prayers into the bread.
Oh, really?
Just quietly, silently, right?
That's nice.
And then we take it at the end and we bake it, and then the next week we break it. We don't eat it.
Right.
As part of our communion. So kneading is a big part of what we do here.
That's really interesting because I find kneading very therapeutic at home. I think a lot while I knead. Sometimes if I'm just stressed out, I need to bake. And we're seeing that a lot during this pandemic. A lot of No, I don't think you need any more flour.
Oh, I didn't put any there.
Cut! Because if there's too much flour, your dough will be heavy and dry. So it looks good. It looks great. So now you rest it for at least 20 minutes, half an hour, but longer if you like. And that will give the gluten a chance to relax. And it won't sort of spring back when you roll it out.
So what does the resting do?
It gives the gluten a chance to relax.
Why does it need to relax?
Because it's stressed out from all the working that you've done, all the kneading. So it needs to chill out for a little bit. And then when you roll it out, so if you rolled it out right away, it would kind of tighten up, it would spring back. It wouldn't stay in this nice thin flat circle or oval or whatever shape you want to make.
So you're making it flat because it's called flat bread.
Because it's a flatbread, yeah. So as thin as you can get it, really. And this is a great thing to do at home when you have kids at home, and or if you don't have kids at home. This is a French rolling pin.
Okay.
People often ask what the difference is between the tapered end rolling pin and the even one. But with the French rolling pin, you can kind of direct the shape of your pastry or your flatbread.
That's nice.
Cool. Yeah, made in Canmore, I believe this one is. So preheated either your skillet or your barbecue grill, and we're going to throw it right on.
That's it.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
So simple.
Bye. Okay, we're letting the dough rest.
Yes.
Okay, and we have our 8-foot hockey stick here.
This is a long one.
This is also a rolling pin.
Yep.
Could be.
We just had a little shimmy out back.
Yes,
Shimmy.
it's flat.
Shimmy.
I will just quietly place this down. Okay, so I've got 10 questions in 7 minutes.
Oh,
okay.
The lightning round.
Okay, and we'll let it rest. So, here's the thing. Have you ever had a recipe that was a flop?
Oh, all the time.
Okay.
Yes.
How do you know it's a flop?
I bring them to David and he tells me.
So you actually take your mistake and share it.
Food is so subjective. One person's flop is another person's delicious meal. So, yeah, recipes require a lot of tweaking, and it's difficult when you write recipes to make sure that they're going to work in everyone's kitchen with different ingredients and different, oven tools, and ovens vary so much. So knowing what the end result should, like the dough should feel like, or what it should look like coming out of the oven is key.
Do you have to follow all the instructions?
It depends. And people say, usually when I teach classes, I ask how many people follow recipe exactly, and it's usually a third of people follow them exactly. But when it's baking, it's a little bit more important to pay attention to the recipe because of the ratio, of fat to flour to leavening to liquid makes a difference, more so in baking than in cooking. But still, when you look at chocolate chip cookie recipe or a biscuit recipe, they vary in all those things. So knowing what the textures should be, what the dough should feel like, is key. Or knowing that more sugar and butter will make a thinner, chewy cookie, or more egg will make a cake.
So basically, follow the ingredients and follow the rules.
Sure.
Okay, that's why.
Okay, let's go with that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're in a time of COVID. What are you discovering about food in this season of COVID that we're in? What do you know about food?
We have 7 minutes for this?
Keep going. You got to keep going. Come on.
What do I know about food? Well, I know everyone's baking more, and baking is comforting. Baking is a great way to spend time with your kids off screen. They learn about math and science and reading. And the smell of baking is just comforting. It's something that we do to share, and it evokes all these nostalgic feelings. So people are baking a lot more, and partly to be self-sufficient. People are learning how to bake bread and make sourdough, partly because they have time to spend at home paying attention to it, partly to keep from going to the store or the bakery, as often as they used to. People are learning how to cook using what they have, which is amazing. I just got goosebumpy thinking about it. It used to be that, those of us who were able to have the luxury of ingredients at home would find a recipe on Pinterest or in a cookbook and, I want to make this. I'm going to go and source the ingredients and make it, rather than look at what we have, what needs using, and what we can do with it. So I feel like people are going backwards. They're starting to use more of the things in the back of their cupboards that they bought for a recipe and used a teaspoon of, and now it's been sitting in their cupboard. So people are getting creative. They're cooking more because they're cooking more all their meals at home with the restaurants being closed. So that's a whole other conversation. But we're also seeing where our vulnerabilities are in our food systems. In processing, in shipping, in growing, in raising our food, in distributing our food, and how we're feeding our most vulnerable members of our community.
Say something about that. I know you're involved in some projects to support it.
Say something about it. So all the agencies are working under restricted COVID protocols. They can't use their same volunteer bases, which are often seniors. So we've seen a lot of agencies like the food bank, for example. We volunteer there, and they're using the same volunteer teams for the same shifts week after week, and you have to commit to a 4-week cycle just so there isn't a lot of crossover. The clients aren't coming in, the hampers are being delivered outside. But all the agencies that have kitchens that are feeding people, a lot of those kitchens are closed. A lot of them are running under restrictions, so producing less. And just the challenge of distributing food is becoming more of a challenge because of that contact. We can't have a lot of people coming through and eating it in one place. One of my main concerns has been the closure of schools. Not only closure of schools, but of boys and girls clubs, of rec centers, of libraries, of all those safe spaces, and all those breakfast and lunch programs that thousands of kids relied on every day to get often their main meal of the day has been cut off with the closure of schools. So access to kids, there's a lot of resources for grown-ups, which is fantastic, but kids who are left to their own devices are the ones that I really worry about.
So I think lots of organizations are finding creative ways to do that kind of support with food.
Yeah.
This is a existential kind of question, but what's the meaning of food? Like, what is, when you were helping the flatbread, helping me make flatbread, you talked about the bread being needing a rest. You talked about how yeast makes it come alive.
Yeah.
So when you think about food, why is food in religions, there's in Ramadan or Passover or the Christian Eucharist, it's part of our nature in religious communities, food's so important. How do you see food just in general, just in a few words? Like, what is food?
Oh boy, food is life. I mean, it's how we nourish ourselves and each other, and it's social, it's cultural. It is affected by the terroir and immigration patterns and families and relationships and celebrations. It's just such a big part of our everyday life, and being able to make it and to feed each other, it's a gesture of support. It's a gesture of affection. It's such a big part of our life, and in so many ways,
Well, this church has a value, one of the values we get for it. One of them is hospitality. Food's hospitable, right? It's not just the making, it's the sharing. I always say on Sunday that we're changed when we eat and drink together because there's a conversation that happens in that. We're not always conscious of it, but there is an exchange that helps deepen our lives through food. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a connector. It brings people together. You often hear, it brings people together around the table, but that's where conversations happen. That's where we learn about other people and their histories and their cultures and their struggles. One of my favorite things is to go into someone's house, and my interest is more in home cooking and how people feed each other, and learn their techniques and their methods of cooking and feeding their families and feeding their friends. Yeah, there's a lot to say.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. And I want to thank you for coming to this house, Hillhurst United Church, to work with a dummy, help me understand. And we're going to go outside and we're going to bake that flatbread.
We're going to grill it.
Oh, we're going to grill it.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
We're not baking, we're grilling.
Well, I mean, if we close the lid of our grill, it would be more of a baking environment. But yeah, we're gonna grill it. Just a hot surface, flip it. It's going to cook quickly.
Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Here we are, beautiful sunny day in Calgary. I just want to thank Ann and Justin who are behind there without umbrellas, and they're holding up a thing keeping the phone dry. Anyway, Julie, we moved outside and we are taking the bread. You tell us what's happening now.
So I've got a hot grill.
Hot grill.
You don't need to brush it with oil or anything, and then just take your flat bread and toss it directly on. Just wait till it's got a nice charred bottom crust. Just sort of typical of grilling. You want to not move it around, not disturb it. Let it get a nice bottom crust. Oh, you can see this one starting to bubble.
Starting to bubble.
And so the high heat, whether you're doing it inside on your cast iron skillet or out on the grill, you'll get those bubbles coming up to the top. It's so satisfying. So you can tell that's the gluten is providing that elasticity. Once it starts to get, see,
I like it.
Nice grill mark.
Is that one mine?
That one is yours. This is one of my favorite things to do outside when we're eating dinner outside. We've got like
Hold on, you're inside, we're outside.
cheese and sucks to be you right now. You guys are, there's water pouring. A little piece of metal that you found to cover
Have
the
a little
camera.
luck here.
Happy Sunday!
Happy Sunday! We're a cohort family, it's all good.
Oh,
You can
there's
tell
no.
I'm the talent.
Yeah.
I'm being protected
Yeah.
underneath it. Yeah. So look at how this is going. So if you have, any kind of cheeses and dips, like just sort of nibbling things that you want to
I'm getting hungry.
serve, everything goes well with flatbread, right? I mean, no matter what you're making, bread will make it better. And once it's golden on the bottom, there we go.
Look at that.
It. So if I was making pizza,
Is that one mine?
that was yours. Yes, that's the one you licked, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. You flip it over, spread your toppings on top, and then if you have a lid, close the lid of your barbecue. Turn it down a little bit, and that will allow the cheese and toppings to melt. And you have this. It's almost like a wood-fired pizza. I mean, wood-fired pizza ovens are 800 degrees. It's not something you get, inside your oven in your house.
Well, you got to remember this is a church barbecue, so it's probably only about 300 degrees.
It's not a super hot grill, but that's okay. And flatbreads around the world have been cooked over open fires.
I love the smell.
Yeah, so it's a perfect way of cooking flatbread.
So we're good. We're going to eat now because, I see them floating away. The background noise of hammers, they're building an ark. And that's going to happen, and Justin and Ann are going to get in. Just a quick peek at them before we go so you can thank them. You can see their breath. They're still alive. Here we are.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm ready to go back to church.
We're done.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going inside.
This is super fun.
Okay, we are back in and we're more dry than Ann and Justin. And we've got our bread here. And I've given Julie a Hillhurst United Church mug. There you go. And it's got coffee in it, just in case you're wondering.
And cream.
And cream, indeed.
Cheers.
So, cheers. I'll just cheers you.
Cheers.
Great. We have the bread here. We're allowed to eat this now?
Yes, it's been pre-broken.
Are you going to eat it too?
I am.
Okay, just
Warm bread, yeah.
one bit. Okay. So this is bread broken. You were saying to me as we were walking in, you got kicked out of church when you were a kid. What'd you say?
Oh, can we say that on camera? I did.
What happened?
Well, at Sunday school,
Hold on, I think everybody should get kicked out of the church sometime. There you go.
for the record,
For the record.
when I was a kid in Sunday school, I told the class that Jesus was like a cross between Santa Claus and Superman.
What a combo.
I kind of thought
Sounds
so.
reasonable.
And I got kicked out.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's a long time ago. I think I was
When I say kicked out, I mean we should always be provoked with great questions. Everyone should be in church if they want to be. But Jesus used this bread to remind people that we're all broken and that bread is sustenance for life. And so we're sharing this bread. Somebody just sneezed.
It's a sign. It's a sign.
We're sharing this great bread. So, thanks for being with us today. I'm just wondering, when you think about where we're at, we've moved from a meat culture to a vegetarian to vegan. What do you imagine 20 years out when it comes to bread and food?
I think bread will always be a staple of our diets in general. And it's so symbolic and it's so nourishing and it's inexpensive and accessible for people. And I think there will always be bread as long as there will be people to share it.
As long as there's bread, there's people to share it. So hopefully you have tried this at home and you're going to share the bread with your family in the form of communion. Every time we eat and drink together, We give thanks for the earth and what it provides, for the creativity and beauty that you have in helping us to enjoy food and see it as a friendly way of connecting one to another. So thanks for being with us. Take the bread into the week in your body, your mind, and your spirit. The curiosity, imagination, and joy come alive this week as we move yet another week through this COVID experience. Thanks for being with us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, bread of life, thanks be to God. Amen.